Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. My name's Charles Green. I'm part of the marketing team here at Belatrix Software, and I'm going to be your host today. Firstly, thank you all very much for taking the time out of your day to join this call. And today we're going to be discussing how you can ensure you are developing compelling user experiences for your products every time. And to achieve this, we're going to outline the key parts of the UX process and also give you a concrete example of where we've applied that particular UX process. Now, we know that developing great user experiences is more important than ever, but at the same time, it's incredibly challenging. Customers today simply have higher than ever expectations of the products and the services that they use, and it's our job to fulfill those expectations. And this webinar aims to give you the basis and the tools to achieve that. But before we go any further, I want to mention that today's session is going to be very open. So while we're going to be presenting to you for much of the next half an hour, please feel free to ask us questions. You can do that either by the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen or via Twitter, where we're going to be live tweeting throughout using the hashtag BestUX2015. Now, I'm delighted to be joined by my colleagues, Bruno Vilches and Barbara Lipinski, our resident UX experts. So would you like to pass it over to you to introduce yourselves briefly? Let's start with Barbara.
Okay, hello, good afternoon. My name is Barbara. I'm a UX designer, and I've been working at this field for more than 5 years and in different design areas for more than 7 years. And I'm in charge of the UX design area in the company.
Excellent, thank you. And Bruno?
Hi Charles, hi everybody. My name is Bruno Vilches and I'm a product manager here at Belatrix, and I've also worked in the front-end world for over 10 years now.
Okay, super, thank you Bruno. So today everyone, just to give an overview of the agenda. It's going to be relatively straightforward. We're going to first start with Barbara. We're going to outline exactly what is user experience in UX, and then we're going to describe to you the 5 key steps which make up an effective UX process. And then finally, we're going to walk you through exactly how we applied this UX process to a specific product here at Belatrix. So with that, I want to pass over to Barbara. Explain exactly what exactly is UX.
Okay, it's a complicated concept. A lot of people are very confused about what user experience is. Mostly, there are a lot of people, there are a lot of designers who say that user experience is like the design behind the visual. And this is some kind of a good approach, mostly because a lot of people are confused about what design is, because they think that it might be like a makeup to put on top of a finalized product, but this is not really what it is. Design is creating a solution for a specific audience, and it could be any piece of design, for example, a billboard or a pair of shoes, or in this case, an interface. So although UX is a new and independent discipline, it is related to design, and to understand it better, we have to know a little bit the evolution of design itself. The first design schools, they used to teach design as a whole, one theory for all of them to apply it into the different areas, but as industries grew and they got a lot more complex, they demanded a lot of specific knowledge in several distinguishable areas. So this is what made that half a century after that, a lot of the design got split into different units of work, and the areas that we know nowadays, like graphic design, product design, were born. So this is what has happened to UX at this moment. It has evolved from the graphic design area, and all the design areas share the same methodology, and they're always using certain base. So nowadays, we live in a digital and connected society where people interact within each other in ways that they have never seen before. And the human-computer interaction created a dialogue between the user and the design, that it's a new space for creating these communications. And this is what made the new discipline to move forward, and this is basically what your user experience is and what we call it. The concept was created in 1995 by Donald Norman, and in an article he titled User Experience Architect. And he invented this term because he thought that human interface and usability were too narrow. So he wanted to take up on account all the aspects between the interaction between a person and the system and the whole experience. So this is the definition that he created. He says that user experience encompasses all aspects of the user interaction with the company and the services and the products. So it goes even farther from the application itself. So we can say that the user experience concept was established to cover the holistic perspective on how a person feels about a system. We have to think about the what, when, where, and why, and how someone uses the product. And this will help us identify the user and their emotion, beliefs, preferences. And the idea is to include all this knowledge about the user in all the different steps of the process of creating this application. But there's not only about the user, because there's a company behind an app and it has its own goals. So the idea is to meet the user's goals with the company goals. So for example, this is another common definition, that user experience is made by the user goals, the business goals, the user interface, and the technology that is applied to it. So in general, we can say that a good user experience has a positive effect on the user and how he feels about the site, the product, and the company. And it has a big impact in how the company can sell their products and the way that the consumers are involved with the product. So here is what we have, all the different areas and all the different parts of what we usually see in user experience. So to start, we say that it's always user-centered. So the most important thing is to know everything we can about the user, the market, and all that's related to who and when and why it's going to use the application. Once we have done this research about these people, we can start thinking about the concepts about how we are going to get the user perform all the tasks he needs. And that's the part of the concepting where we can include the user story, process flows, and content maps. And after we have done all of this part, that is more than 50% of the work, then we can go to the design board and start creating prototypes or wireframes depending on the stage of the process that we are. And as every good quality product, we always need to test and validate it with the user and what the expectations that the user had about it. So then we test it, and maybe we should go back into some parts of the process to redo or restart some things that we just need to adjust. So another way to put these different elements is through what Jesse James called the 5 planes of the user experience, and these are 5 steps to follow that go from most abstract to more concrete ideas. So we have to start with a strategy. In this case, we have to ask ourselves some questions. For example, what is the big goal of the product? or what does the user want, and what does the business want. After that, we can move to the scope. And here is when we get to the user stories and the list of goals and objectives of the use of the software. And here you can also make some questions. For example, how does the product help the user? How many clicks do we have to take to perform some several tasks? And what type of users are interested in this application? In this stage, we also define the personas. And then we go to the structure. And this is a little more tangible. This is when we have all the content, all the information, and we have to figure out the way to place it into the application. And of course, there are some questions that you can ask yourself, like how do all these pieces fit together and how they behave? How does the user find what he's looking for? And what are the main flow of actions that it's going to take? Then we go to the other part, which is the skeleton. In this case is where the wireframes and the design starts to come out, and we decide where to put all the different elements to make sense to the user, and we have to take account into the layout and the navigations and all the different interaction elements. But these wireframes shouldn't have any colors and styles, so you can focus only in functionality and in the workflow, and there are no other things to distract the user from that. After testing this and making sure that everything is okay, we can now go to the surface, that is like the visual part that works with the colors, the typefaces, and in this case you can apply all that has to do with the branding and the different visual metaphors that will make the application look well to the user. So this is more or less the process, and now we can go forward to see a case study where we can apply all the steps.
Barbara, I was just thinking while you explained the audience about the user experience process. Do you think we can say that user experience is about communicating?
Of course, it's always about communicating. In general, when we think about design, we think about communication. We think what a business or something has to say to a certain audience, that in this case would be the user.
Okay, great. So we have now prepared a case study where we applied all the process that Barbara just described to us. The app name is called WIT, and first we have to understand the business goals as the first step of the process. So what we had there was an internal administration system that it had many company-related features and some talent management ones. So the requirement from the company was to strip all the internal based features and create new specific talent management ones. In that way, they could leverage a new talent management system, small that aims or targets actually small to medium-sized companies that would need it. So this is just one screenshot of the base that we started from. We can see that it's not very thought of, but we started creating the different personas and profiles that we needed in order to understand who the user was. We already had the goal from the company, the business goals, but now we need to understand the user needs. So along with Barbara here, we created some personas. Personas can be understood as profiles. Barbara, do you want to explain the audience, because you actually done this part?
Okay, a persona would be like a way to model and summarize the research about the people who is going to use the application. So it's like a fake person, but it has all the synthesized information about all the users that we have researched. This is like a specific somebody, but it has like the generic everybody in it. In this case, we created 3 personas, and they're related to their role and type of use. You can see like there is a lot of differences between each of these persona and the interaction that they are going to have with the application. And this is very important to understand the way or the different ways that they are going to use this application. And most of the times, these different roles and these different personas would not use the application in the same way. So you have 2 choices in that sense. One is to create different designs and different flows for different personas, or just to focus on the main user and design for that and adapt little things to the other users. This was the approach that we took for this application, and we focused on the main person. In this case would be Mary, who is like human resources analyst, and she's going to be working with the app the most part of the day.
Exactly. Remember that this was a human resource app for managing talent, and what Barbara was just saying is that every persona that we identified had different motivations for using the product, and they also had different expectations from it.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see how we continued the process in this app. So after creating all the personas, we identify the final user needs. So the people told us that they wanted to perform advanced searches using multiple criteria. They wanted to find vital information, including availability, skills, positions, absences about all the employees in the system. They wanted to follow their career progress and development, run performance evaluations, upload vacations, receive alerts when something important happens in the app or something required their attention. So now, at this point, we have both the user needs and the business goals. We need to mix that into the following steps. The problems that we detected from the users after identifying the business goals and the user needs were the following. What we mean about problems detected is what is moving us apart from reaching the objective, from meeting the user needs and from reaching the business goals. So the problems here listed, such as poor information architecture, it was difficult to find main actions, to the same navigation elements are visible for all users, or it wasn't adapted for tablet devices, a poor layout, goes from very specific things to a more abstract problem. After identifying the problem, we need to start breaking them apart and to see which ones can be easily corrected or which ones will have more important impact in the app. So here we can see one of the problems that we listed before. It was the information architecture. It was very difficult to find things. The visual elements were not consistent. So we started grouping the different problems, and we made a proposal. We listed all possible interactions from every persona, and because in this case, we had a limited budget, because UX is about making it cost effective. We really need to get the money out of the investment. So we propose to focus on the 20% most common interactions and create significant improvements on those interactions. Of course, we had to do something about the remaining 80%, but we will reduce also the amount of needed clicks and improve the user experience. But in case of a conflict of interest, we'll go with the 20% most common actions. And finally, we propose to increase user satisfaction by at least 40%. That metric was comparing the initial customer user satisfaction from the surveys and the final user satisfaction from the same users. So everything has to be measured in UX. What you don't measure can't be improved. So you need a lot of metrics about everything. Here we're just listing a few actions that were the most common ones to see how the people reacted to them. For example, they said that, let's focus on the first row, they said that they wanted to search employees from a department, building, and a career, and it took 12 clicks to achieve that. And the most common comment was that it was very difficult to get this metric, and if you created a filter, that it couldn't be saved. And they rated as a user satisfaction index 5 out of 10. And the second row, we can see a different action. That it was to get a report from selected KPIs, so from selected performance indicators that they were meaningful for our users. And they needed 8 to 10 clicks to achieve that. The most common comment was that it was very difficult to do that because 8 to 10 clicks to get a quick, very used metric was a lot, and some of the metrics weren't available at all. So they ranked the user satisfaction index in a 3 out of 10. So how do we start changing that?
Okay, once we have all this information that Bruno was talking about, we started working with the mockups and showing them to the real users in order to get what they were looking for. As the most frequent task for this user would be the searching of employees, we wanted to take this view as a starting point. So this was the first screen that we prototyped and we wireframed. We wanted to maximize the space for the content, making all the other contextual elements like the menu and the login information the smallest as possible, so we could have a good space for all the information that really the user wants to be looking at. For the filter solution, we decided to create a fixed filter that would stay on the page all the time, and it could be updated at the same time. And at the right of that, we can see all the list of patients that we didn't want to use a table because it's not so easy to go through the different rows. So we use like a list of things, trying to preserve the hierarchy between the elements.
It's important to notice here that the proposal, this wireframe, could only be achieved after identifying the goals of the business, the user needs, the problems that got us away from that. So we are trying to close a gap between the needs and goals and what was going on there in the app. So always keep in mind that the profiles, the users that are going to use this, because maybe you create a wireframe not thinking about the users, and then they don't like it. You actually got it worse than it was before.
Exactly. For example, if we had think about the third persona that we described before, that was the common employee whose interest interested in the use of this application will be completely different, because he maybe just wants to check about his own vacations or to update his skills or whatever. This could be completely useless for this kind of user, and that's the important thing of the UX and the requirements. Well, this is another example of one of the other very common pages, which is the employee profile. In this view, we had the problem that there were so much information to display at the same screen, and there were so different categories and different things, and we wanted to make it easier for the user. So we thought about using a progressive disclosure to just show the most important information at the first glance, and to allow the user to go a little deeper and expand the information and search for more details by clicking just in different buttons. In general, they say that, for example, the more clicks you have, the worse the application is, but user experience is not just like a mathematic recipe. And in this case, it was a lot better to have a little more clicks than to have all this overwhelming information that the user wasn't going to be able to identify.
Yeah, what you're saying is very important, because it's often confused. It's very common to confuse reducing the number of clicks with having a great user experience.
Exactly.
But sometimes if you reduce the number of clicks for everything, you end up cluttering the screen with
Exactly.
a lot of information.
Exactly, and the user doesn't know where to look, what to search, and it's worse. It's even worse. Okay, here there are two examples of the last part of the UX process when we started applying the visual to the first mockups we have. And as we did it with the complete process, we had users test it and gave us their opinions of what they were looking for. Of course, the visuals is not something that you decide to put just because it looks pretty. You need to follow all the requirements, and it has to be related to all the research and all the things that you have gathered through all the application. In this case, for example, we understood that the use of color would be very important to identify important information and to have visual cues on where to click, what to see when there were hidden match or charts or things like that. So we decided to keep all the rest of the page in neutral colors and very light colors, so they wouldn't compete, and the user could have at the first glance the idea of what they are searching for just by seeing at the colors.
Yeah, at this point, we actually printed the screens created in the computer, not even mocking them up in real HTML, but just printing them and handing out to the user, so they could actually try to make a search, for example, in this case, and we could see how they would do it. So with a very small investment, because we have a budget to meet, with very small investment, we can get a pretty good idea on how the users are going to actually interact with the screens. And of course, after doing that, you start learning a lot, and you start correcting a lot.
Exactly.
You start iterating the process.
Exactly. It's never a line, a process. You always have to go back and forth all the time, searching for the best, the best option. And you can say that maybe UX it's like never done. You can always have room for improvements, and if you have the budget, the time, and the resources, you always need to be searching for those improvements. This is, for example, the page that the style that we define at like the final visual style, where we make the gray color as invisible as possible. So what you see at the first glance in this screen is the image of the employees and the colors that are related to the functional use of the color. And this is, we got here after a few tests and a few adjustments on the design and the colors.
You know, Barbara, I just kept thinking about the iteration process that you mentioned. And this is a question that I get a lot, is where do we stop the process? But to me, the answer is it depends. I don't know if you agree. It depends on the budget of your,
exactly.
of your goals.
In general, we never stop. Do we need to stop? No. Actually, because it changes all the time. It's something that it's almost alive. The users change, the styles change, what the expectation changes. Maybe we launch this site and it's perfect, but maybe in 3 months later, another competitor launches a site that is better than this. So we have to rethink everything that we have done and see why the user doesn't like some things and why does he like others. But it always will depend on their budget and what is the company needs.
So you don't want to miss the time to market.
Yeah, of course. There are a lot of things.
It's a balance. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what you have always to have in mind. Okay, well, as we were saying that everything needs to be tested with the users, and even when you have a finalized application that you have all the wireframes, the colors, the size, the visuals, everything, you may need to be creating another components. For example, here we have the vertical menu, and what we did, we gave it to the user, and we saw how long did it take to a user to perform their task in the different options. So according to the results of that is when we decided to go with the first one that was a lot better to the user. And if you think about it, it's not a big change on design, and you say maybe this is not going to have a very good impact or a large impact, but at the end it does. So it's always a good idea to test things before you start developing.
Exactly. And you're testing small things.
Exactly.
Small things. It's always worse to try to correct a problem when you have your big app and it's already launched than to have it correct in this phase.
Exactly, and even before you start coding those things, because when you put all the code in there and everything it's mixed together, it's very difficult and it has a lot of investment to make changes. And sometimes you maybe don't be aware, but you can make very hard mistakes. And going back, it's always very expensive.
Yeah, you're carrying them over and
exactly.
It's much more expensive to solve them in more advanced phases of the process than to do it soon.
Exactly. That's what happens. Okay, another thing, it's about the documenting the UX process. In this case, it's not the UX, it's just the visuals. It's always a good practice to have a style guide. In an ideal world, the UX designer would be with the project all the time, but it doesn't happen all the time this way. And maybe if it does, it's always good to have all the line guides, the guidelines on how the application should grow and what you should use and what not to. So to end all the process, it's a good thing to have a style guide where to look at for future references.
No, exactly, and you have to think that not everyone involved in the project is a user experience expert.
Exactly.
As a matter of fact, they're the least.
Yes.
So if you have something that serves as a reference or something that you can always fall back to, it's very good to correct mistakes as soon as they're made.
Exactly.
So you don't depend on the user expert all the time.
Exactly.
Because it's expensive for the project.
Of course. And even for UI developers, they can take a look at this and know exactly what component to use in what situation. So it saves a lot of time and a lot of effort to have something like this.
Okay, so after running through the whole process and after getting our new screens and new user experience, information architecture, it was a really different app from the beginning. So we had to test what actually worked, where we could improve, or where we just had to start over.
Mm-hmm.
So this is some parts are even measured before actually coding it, and some other parts you have to just give some code to the app so you can test it. So let's focus on the two metrics, actually the two actions that we mentioned before. It was searching a place from a department, building a career. It took 12 clicks, and now with the new information architecture, we managed to reduce them to 4. The comment was that it was very difficult to get the metric, and you have to create a filter, or if you create a filter, it couldn't be saved. The most common comment after the changes were that it was great, that they really liked it, that all the filters were in one place. That is telling us that the information architecture has significantly improved. That's one of our tasks as user experts. We have to translate how the user is communicating things in order to understand it and to make it more abstract or more concrete actions. So they also told us that it took a second or two to load the changes, and that was understandable because we changed the way that they interact, and after selecting one filter, we were refreshing all the screen, actually all the grid. So it is understandable that we would take a second or two to load. And the user index, from their perspective, raised from 5 to 8. And the other action that we measured was getting a report from selected indicators, and they needed 8 to 10 clicks to achieve that, and we reduced them to 1 because they were one of the 20% most common interactions. We put all the important KPIs directly on the dashboard, and that significantly improved the user satisfaction index that went from a 3 to a whopping 10 out of 10. So we have the conclusion. I don't know. We have many conclusions after running through the whole process. Do you want to?
Okay, just I want to talk about from the first glance when you see it. You have at the left the previous applications, the starting point where we started, and at the right you have what we get. So at just one glance, you can see that there's a big improvement in the information architect, in the visual interface, in all the visual cues to find easily the information. It is a lot intuitive. It is a lot more pleasing to the eye. So the results are on site there. You can see it yourself.
Yep. That's very good. The importance here to me is that we analyzed, we identified, we proposed, we tested the proposal, and then got a different version that it was tested on users, that it worked, and that it improved many indicators, many metrics that we needed to get better. So at the end of the day, that's the important thing here, is to improve whatever you were measuring before, so you can meet both the business goals and the user needs.
Yes. Okay. Basically, that's the idea, and you can see well how a better user experience will have a very good impact in the whole company strategy and the product that you're selling at the end of the day.
Yeah. So what do you think, Charles?
Yeah, absolutely excellent. It's been a fascinating tour through user experience. So thank you very much for sharing your expertise today.